So welcome to our third in a series of the Keep Your Business Moving bite-sized webinars brought to you by Merchants Fleet, the nation's fastest growing fleet management company, serving those companies that leverage vehicles to do their jobs and get goods and services to their clients, something that is essential at this time. We hope that everyone on this webinar is safe and well, and our thoughts go out to those who have been impacted by this pandemic. We know it hasn't been easy, and we are all working through it together. My name is Amanda Rogers, and I serve as the Vice President of Marketing and Innovation here at Merchants. I will be today's moderator as we navigate the topic of leading effectively during challenging and changing times through the Tough Times Playbook. As we go through our discussion today, if you think of questions along the way, please don't hesitate to send them in the chat, and we will address them at the end. So let's get right to it. I'm joined by three of the Merchants Fleet leadership team who have extensive experience in leadership and have been executing these plays daily. And since these are bite-sized webinars, each of our panelists have been asked to bring a snack with them that has kept them moving. Today, I have a few pieces of dark chocolate with me. With that, I'd like to introduce Brendan Keegan, CEO of Merchants Fleet. Good morning, Brendan.
Morning. My snack of choice today is nutrition, heart healthy mix from Planters.
Excellent, thank you. Next to Brendan, we have Janine Charlton, Senior Vice President and Chief Technology and Digital Officer. Hi, Janine.
Good morning, Amanda. My snack of choice is an oatmeal raisin almond butter protein bar. Yum.
Excellent. Thanks, Janine. And finally joining us today is Jerry Pavlich, Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer. Hello there, Jerry.
Hi, Amanda. How are you? Today, my snack of choice is a Larabar. I will have to tell you that being away from the office has allowed me to eat much more healthy, and I probably lost a couple notches on my belt loop as a result of being away from the grab and go.
That's great to hear, Jerry, and I'm sure you've been out running quite a bit as well. All right, so to kick us off, I'll send it over to you, Brendan. Can you explain what the Tough Times Playbook is and why you developed it?
Yeah, so I go back to the first time, I got thrown into a crisis was really when the internet bubble burst. And I remember as I was taking a company through that, just started saying, it's really important to communicate. It's really important to be transparent. And then, after it was all over, I'd kind of written a lot of notes to myself of, hey, if I'm ever in a crisis again, what are some things I would do again? What are some things I would change? And then the next crisis was 9/11. And I kind of pulled the playbook out and followed a lot of it, but also added to it, added to things that I wish I had done in the first one. And then back in 2008, 2009, when we had the financial crisis with banks melting down and the economy and such, I was able to kind of pull that Tough Times Playbook and say, what did I do in the first, second, and how would I handle things now? And I just kind of created a playbook from it. And now in our fourth major crisis that I've had the opportunity to manage through, and I do say opportunity because I think you can come out through it stronger. I've really just put a playbook together of 7 plays, and if you can follow these 7 plays, you'll most likely get to the other side successfully.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. And what I really like about this is that last point you made, which is it's a playbook. It's something that other people can emulate and use as a system as they're navigating these types of crises. So can you help leaders understand how to follow these steps and maybe give a little detail on them?
Sure. I'll just touch on, each of these lightly, and then, we can maybe spend some of the time using some examples. But, the first one is, when you're faced with any crisis is to not hide from it, not run away from it. It's not going to go away on its own. It's just kind of to lean in and confront it and to be transparent with your employees, your clients, your partners, and yourself. Don't tell yourself, oh, we're going to be fine if you're not. Don't tell yourself, oh, this is going to be over in a week if it's going to take a month. But really just don't hide from it, face it, confront it, walk right into it, and lean in. The second is once you've embraced that you are in some type of crisis, you're in some type of tough time, is to develop a clear action plan. What if this lasts a month, 2 months, 3 months? What if it impacts one segment of your business, two segments of your business? But come up with a very clear action plan of what are you going to do to get through this. The third is to focus on your employees. I've always had a leadership philosophy of if you focus on your employees first, they'll take care of your clients. And I know some people believe, clients first. And I just as more of an employee-centric leader, I always feel as if I take care of my employees and I do really right by them, they'll take care of the clients. So focus on the employees first. Right now that's fundamentally their health and safety. Fourth is, you get hired for some reason. You have great products, you have great service. Continue to deliver those same great products and great service. Just because the world or your region or your industry is going through some crisis or tough time doesn't mean that your clients expect anything less from you. The fifth play is really opening up all channels of communication. I think when you go through a tough time, you want to communicate more than you do in a pre-crisis time, in a pre-tough time, because if you don't communicate, they'll fill that void. So you want to open up all channels of communication. And the sixth play, really important, is market shift, and you need to be flexible. One segment may be drying up, but something else is opening up. So as many challenges as these global crises, this pandemic today is giving us, it's also creating that many equal opportunities for us to pursue. And then the last is think long-term. In every crisis that we've been through is a moment in time. It's in the scheme of your business life, it's going to represent more of a speed bump than a decade-long activity. So kind of think long-term. When we come out of this, what are we going to want? And make sure you don't do anything short-term that hurts your long-term viability. So those are the 7 plays, Amanda.
Great. Thanks, Brendan. And you mentioned communication and opening up all channels of communication. I think one thing that's been really prevalent in this time is the ability to access all types of communication channels. And I know this is really important to you, Janine, so why don't I kick it over to you to just walk us through, an example of that communication channel and how you've been able to leverage that.
Sure thing, Amanda. Technology has really given us more channels of communication and more opportunities to connect than it ever has before. Consider the platforms we had available just 5 years ago, where it was basically email and some form of web conferencing, versus today, we have access to tools like Zoom, SharePoint, Yammer, and Voice over IP. And I think it's great that the integrated nature of Office 365 really allows us to drive more productivity and collaboration across the enterprise. This has really impacted not only productivity, but our company culture in such a positive way that we would have never imagined previously. And it really has expedited the adoption of technology across the entire company. And I believe people are being far more present. I would encourage all of you to really take the opportunity to reimagine what communications with your team could be, as this is really the biggest agility experiment of our life. And also think about how you can translate the virtual communication wins into in-person methods when you're back on site. We've done things like implement virtual company-wide meetings. We do them every Friday, and it's turned into not only an opportunity for Brendan to update all employees on kind of the state of business across the company, but to also incorporate some fun things. We've done a virtual talent show, and it was a blast. It really has strengthened the culture, and our employees really look forward to it and want to see more of it.
Excellent. Thanks, Janine. And, I think it's been really great for me to just see using, video conferencing systems where everyone's on video and being able to interact and see each other, even though we can't be together right now. But let's switch gears here. And speaking about putting employees first, I know your team worked diligently to make sure that the transition to a remote working environment was extremely smooth. How have these communication tools helped to connect employees?
Well, given that this has really been the longest work from home experiment in the history of the world, We've gotten really creative with our approach at Merchants. Within the technology team, we started what we call a virtual water cooler. These are weekly 1-hour sessions where we combine an educational topic with an opportunity to also have fun. And we rotate who has the hosting responsibilities that week. One really fun recent example is one of my leaders brought his wife, who is a school teacher, to lead an activity about how to make paper flowers and then decorate your water bottles. And then we went on to talk about connected vehicles. Another example would be where we had somebody give an update on our recent renewal of our Microsoft licensing agreement. And it just so happens that he's also a beekeeper. So he gave us an educational experience on what it takes to kind of raise bees and how he makes honeys. And it really turned into such a unique opportunity for us to connect in a different way. And now, of course, all of our employees in the tech team are looking forward to receiving a jar of that honey. It's really generated a high level of participation and an opportunity to have individual contributors lead within the tech team. And one last example is that we've been able to host company-wide Zoom meetings. We literally have hundreds of employees join in on these Zoom meetings on a weekly basis. And we've had a blast. We've done things like talent shows, bring your kids to work day, and one of my favorites, bring your dog to work day.
Great. And, you know, I just have to make a comment that I really love honey, so I'll have to get some of that at some point. But thank you, Janine. Your perspective is great. And, you know, I think I'd like to shift gears and switch it over to Jerry. So, Jerry, let's look long term. Being our finance leader, you're immersed in determining what decisions need to be made today to make sure we have a secure future. How have you implemented Play 7 to get others in your department and our company to think just beyond today and have that long-term perspective?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Amanda. I think first, though, and foremost, is kind of set a little bit of a backdrop before I talk about what we're doing, because you know you're a little younger than I am. You haven't been around the block quite as many times as I have, but I will tell you, over the course of our lifetimes, you know, we're all likely to experience a great number of crises that affect both our personal and professional lives. Right? They come in many forms, whether economic, natural disasters, or what we're experiencing right now, you know, a global pandemic that's having a profound impact on how businesses operate, right? Companies large and small, you know, public and private, are facing challenges of an truly unprecedented nature. You know, how they react and the actions that they take now will not only determine their survival, but their long-term survivability and sustainability. So I think it's really important when you think about, you know, decision making is first and foremost assessing how the landscape that we're in right now or anytime we enter a crisis is how it's affecting our top line and our bottom line revenues, right? You know, I will say that, you know, this pandemic has had a very uneven impact on industries and companies across America and across the globe. You take, for example, the travel and hospitality sectors, you know, airlines, hotels, rental cars, convention space, you know, their very survival is at stake right now, and the decisions that they make are absolutely have to be short-term in nature. So I'm not beginning to suggest that they should throw that out the window and start thinking long-term at this minute, right? Now, for those companies, taking every step they can to preserve cash and manage working capital is of extreme importance. You know, at Merchants, we find ourselves in a slightly different spot than a lot of other folks out there. And I will say we've had to make a lot of tough decisions, you know, ourselves to preserve cash, protect working capital, but we've also worked very hard at maintaining our long-term focus and our growth objectives, right? I like to think that what we've done is, you know, is use more of a scalpel approach, very much more surgical in nature than a broad brush approach to cutting costs and personnel reductions, right? You know, I think what the very benefit of that is it's allowed us to, you know, maintain our focus on our long-term strategic goals of growing the business, because what we've done is we've cut expenses that were of a variable nature where we could, We've also taken some fixed costs out of the business, but we've done it, at the expense of preserving our long-term focus on our sales and on the front end of our business. Because when we come out of this crisis, we really want to be able to hit the ground running. So we don't want to have to rebuild what we took so long to build over the last several years now.
It's great perspective, Jerry. And I think, with these challenging types of decisions, it's been more important than ever to have open and honest communications. So let's maybe talk a little bit about that. Can you walk us through an example of why being transparent, even when it's difficult, is the best way to handle things?
Sure. Thank you. I think for finance, this is where the rubber really meets the road, right? And for a long time at Merchants, we've thought of finance as a critical business partner, right? Years back, I probably would have looked at it and said finance was much more of a record and report organization, more command and control. But today, we really are a partner to our businesses, and our businesses rely upon us quite heavily. The term we use locally is embedded, because we like to think that we're right in the trenches with our business partners. So I will say, though, for all intents and purposes, we're operating no different today than we were pre-COVID, because we've always prided ourselves on being very, very transparent, right? As a function, we provide a lot of valuable insights and real-time analytics to the business and how the business is performing. We talk KPIs, key process indicators, and key KBRs, which are key business results, right? So what we do is we take great pride and take pain in educating the organization on why we're making the decisions that we're making and why we're taking the actions that we are taking. I will say that one of the biggest things that we've done in the short term is to really focus on a daily dashboard, right? Because what we focused on are a handful of key metrics that when we get together as a leadership team, that allows us to get a real-time sense of how the business is performing. And as a result, we can take, we can change our course of action and pivot if we have to very, very quickly, right? But really at the end of the day, I view transparency as a way, to help me get my job done, because the more transparent I am with others, the more they are willing to accept some of the actions that we're taking. And really it's about understanding. So to the extent that they understand them, they're much more likely to understand and well, tough decisions, it's still one of those things where, folks accept, even though, accept it, even though it's a very difficult decision. So, it's a lot easier to get to have folks work with you than work against you. So that's kind of what I've always prided myself on.
Appreciate that, Jerry. And I think, you mentioned the daily dashboards and a lot of the work that your team is doing. And I think that's been critical in terms of developing that clear action plan. So why don't we kick it back over to Brendan to talk about the action plan perspective and creating that aspect of the playbook. So Brendan, can you tell us why developing a clear action plan is so important for leaders during a crisis, and give us a few bullet points on that?
Sure. So, I think when you think about developing a clear action plan, it kind of starts with, how long are you going to be in a given crisis? So whenever I look at a challenge or an opportunity, I tend to look at it from a systems approach. So we start with, how long is this going to last? What if it lasts 30 days? What if it lasts 60 days? What if it lasts 90? What if it lasts 180? And then you're able to start to put, how would you appropriately react? So for instance, in our systems approach of how long this would last, we just created a color system. Green, everything's normal. White, it's fine, no actions are taken. And then we had yellow, orange, red. So as COVID started to take off, we went from green to white. Okay, we're on alert. We went to yellow. Okay, now we actually have to take some action. And ourselves, just like many of you, we have different businesses. We have 3 different core businesses, and one is affected more. One is a consumer-based business where consumers have to physically come into our location. So you can imagine that one's off quite a bit more than one that is a national mobile workforce. So depending on what your business is going to depend on the scenario. Well, once you kind of outline the time-based part of it, you then want to have focused work streams. So I mentioned we have 3 separate businesses within. So we had a team focused just on our consumer auto business, because those actions are going to be very different than our essential business, business to business, for delivery, for last mile, for those types of carriers. And I think when I think of my friends I've talked to that are in similar roles, they have some businesses that are up and down. So have focused work streams. We have work streams on the business segments. We have a work stream focused on the people. We have a work stream focused on communication. We have a work stream focused on our economics and financial plan. And then have teams aligned with those and have them working so that as things change, as your alert system goes yellow to orange and hopefully not to red, that what actions are you going to take. And then the third aspect of developing a clear action plan is having a regular cadence for your employees, for your clients, for your work stream activities, for your partners. So for instance, right now, we're communicating with our employees on a daily basis. We communicate much more today than we did pre-COVID. And that's because we're giving them information on what's happening in the industry that we normally wouldn't have to, just because nothing unique was happening. But now we're having to have a cadence, and it's the same time every day. For our leaders, we meet the same time every day. We used to meet just 1.5 hours a week, Monday mornings at 9 a.m. Now we're meeting every day at 3. And we're looking at that scorecard that Jerry talked about. So we really run the company on a daily basis now with 8 simple metrics. But everyone had all sorts of metrics. We had to say, what are the most important for us to make decisions on a daily basis? And then to your employees, the employees they want some normalcy. They're working out of their basement, their attic, their kitchen table, their dining room table, their bedrooms. So it's not normal for them, but if we can create some normalcy, every Friday having an event, every Monday getting a note that's going to talk about what's going on in the week, getting updates every Friday on how is the business performing, I think creates a normalcy that allows employees to feel more settled. So Amanda, those would be the kind of taking a systems approach to developing a clear action plan.
Yeah, and what I like about that is, I've heard this term of uncertain times quite often. And I think even though there may be some uncertainties, having a plan and having something you can rely on with different, that 30, 60, 90-day approach has really helped us to be able to make decisions. But along those lines, you also mentioned having the ability to be opportunistic and be flexible. And so let's shift over to that thought process real quick. Can you talk to us about the experience you've had in recognizing markets shifting and being flexible during these times?
Yeah, anytime there's any type of crisis, there's companies that come out that are winners, and there are companies that come out and lose in these situations. So, as a company, our vision is really simple: enable the movement of people, goods, and services. Well, we have a segment of our business that's summer camp, where we move kids all over the country in the summer, in summer camp vans. We also have a segment focused on academic institutions, mostly colleges. Well, you can imagine that those two, we're not going to be moving many kids this summer. But what we're able to do is sit around a table on our daily huddles and say, what is going to move more? So, well, I think we all know there's more toilet paper moving across the country. There's more groceries moving across the country. So we said, okay, let's just slow down. Let's think differently. We're not going to be moving college kids and sports teams. We're not going to be moving kids at summer camps. Okay, let's pivot to more last mile and let's focus on moving essential items, goods, and services for people. So the first is to say, what types of societal changes, what type of technology changes, are there any economic changes that are coming about? And take some time to slow down and think, because the markets are shifting. Now, a lot of people think that big companies have the advantage because they have more resources. And in times like this, the company that is able to move fast is the company that has the advantage. So if you're able to say, take a certain product line and repurpose it from one market to another market based on availability or based on your particular company's skill sets, you're going to be able to be successful in this. And then the third aspect of market shifting and being flexible is literally being comfortable at being uncomfortable, being willing to do whatever it takes. So I gave the example, and we have part of our business is a consumer business. So that's off quite a bit. Well, we took a number of employees from that, put them into another business. They were salespeople that were selling pre-owned vehicles. We're not doing as much of that as we were. So we've asked people to come in and sell nationally to delivery and courier companies across the country. So they went from shaking someone's hand, asking them how their family's doing, and selling them a minivan, to now leasing cargo vans. So it's very different in doing that over the phone. But what we've seen is the people are willing to do whatever it takes, and that's allowing us as a company to continue to perform. But you've got to have employees, you've got to have a culture where it's really focused on you're willing to do whatever it takes. And at times, that means you're doing things that don't make you comfortable. Tough times aren't the times that you're comfortable. It's how you act in them, though, and are you able to kind of shift with the markets, be flexible, and come out the other side of a tough time a better, stronger company for it.
Great points. And I think that, hearing that story about shifting some employees is really indicative of that culture of being willing to do whatever it takes. And we've seen that, and we're really, really grateful for it for our team and the company overall. So we only have a few minutes left. We actually got quite a few questions. So I think we have time probably for one, maybe two. And I'll start with this one is for Janine. Comment is our company is a bit more on the conservative side, and transitioning to online communication methods has been challenging. Do you have any advice for how to start breaking down that cultural barrier to get more participation?
Sure. Given that this new way of working got implemented literally without any transition, I would really encourage everybody to think about how you make collaboration and communication fun. One thing that I really like is the ability to, be on a Zoom call, people turn on their cameras, we can see each other. It allows us to connect in a much more personal way than just a phone call would. So get your cameras on and start engaging with your employees. And then the final point would be is I would really encourage, you to get your teams to forget about the email conversations. With the use of technology, we're able to communicate in a different way. So let's take advantage of it.
Great, thanks, Janine. And this last one we have time for is for Jerry. So Jerry, what are some of your methods and strategies for shifting to long-term thinking? It's very easy to get stuck in addressing the near term when things are changing so rapidly.
Well, let's talk just a little bit about strategies just for a second, Amanda, because, first and foremost, if you had a sound strategy to begin with, then that strategy should remain in effect and in force. And you may pivot at times, because of the cards that you're dealt or the hand that you're dealt. But if you had a sound strategy to begin with, and I think we have, we set out on a mission a couple of years ago to change the course of how we were, perceived in the fleet industry and move up the league tables. So in a lot of ways, our strategy really hasn't changed at all. We're still operating as if our long-term goals and our long-term forecast is what we're intending to achieve. So yes, we've had to take some actions in the short term and pivot, but for all intents and purposes, the long-term strategy is just as sound today as it was yesterday.
Great, thank you, Jerry. All right, so that is all we have time for, but if you do have additional questions, feel free to add them to the chat and we can address them after the webinar. Would like to thank you all for joining us. Thank you, panelists, for all of your excellent perspective and feedback for us. And looking forward, our next bite-sized webinar with the Merchants team will be on Tuesday, May 12th, again at noon Eastern Time. This webinar will focus on data security and in the area of remote working. So I think, with Janine's most recent question, that is very relevant. For a sign-up link to this webinar, as well as recordings from our past webinars, you can go to merchantsfleet.com/keep-moving. We will also send out an email for the sign-ups as well, so you can look out for that. And, in closing, stay healthy, everyone, stay safe, and know that Merchants is here for you to keep you moving.